Marcus King, Brent Hines, Charlie Starr, Scott Holiday, Tyler Bryant, Benji Shanks. Who are these people? They all play Banker Guitars. Banker Guitars is my sponsor for the Grail podcast, and it is an honor to have them as the first sponsor of the Grail, because the Grail is all about handmade, fantastic items, people with passion. And that is exactly what Banker Guitars is. Go to bankerguitar.com and get yourself a fantastic custom-made guitar. Matt Hughes is killing it in the boutique guitar world. He has taken classic designs and built them like they were built in the 50s. No corners cut, all handmade, all of the great stuff you expect. Nitrocellulose, incredible woods, perfect fretboards, Brazilian, Carina, all kinds of exotic woods available. Unreal, this man. Hit him up, sales@bankerguitar.com. Tell him I sent you. Or go to their Instagram, Mr. Banker, and get yourself one of these insane guitars. All right. We are back. And I am very, very happy with what happened with episode 1 with Grover Jackson. It was number 44 in the iTunes chart out of 200. It's sitting in the top 200 still a week later. And it is just it's just a dream come true to be able to have all these people under one umbrella. If you're new here, welcome back to part 2 of Grover Jackson. Like I said before, I interviewed him and I felt no way was that enough, and went back the following week and talked to him some more. I thought about it as I drove home. It's interesting to think about how something can be wiped out. Say a musical style, say the 80s. All right. We had that whole 80s thing going on. The, what they call hair metal. And then of course, just straight up metal. All that was red hot. And they were all using Jackson and Charvel guitars. And then when that kind of drifted off and went into a new era of music, a lot of things went to the wayside from that also that you don't think about. Not only did the musicians find themselves out there asking their record companies like, hey man, what's going on? What happened? But it was everything that was involved with that also. The clothing companies that made clothes for all these rock stars, the video directors that were doing all those big videos, and Charvel Jackson. All of a sudden, oh, whoa, you don't want to have one of those. You might be from the 80s. We don't want the 80s right now. And it's really wild to think about all the things that are affected by a shift in a complete musical, genre. A good example was for many years when hip hop was really, really smoking. They were like, the guitar is dead. The guitar is going to be done. The DJs came. The guitar is dead again. They keep trying to bury the guitar. They keep trying to fucking have the funeral for the guitar. And here in COVID, when everything's dying, the guitar is the biggest right now. Fender is having their biggest year ever. I know a lot of my builder friends, Billy at Rock and Roll Relics. I know Matt at Banker. I know Echo Park. I know numerous builders are out there. They can't even keep up with their orders. People are home. They're ready to really sit down and learn guitar. And you cannot bury the guitar. It's never going to go away. I do think personally, and this is just me, and it doesn't fucking, matter at all, but I do feel that the vintage market eventually is going to drift away. Because I think that people, younger generations, this is what I feel. I don't think they're going to care about vintage cars because I think there's going to be so many, rules and regulations on old school vintage muscle and say Porsches and any air-cooled vehicles. I think there's going to be so many regulations on those that people are going to be like, I can't have that. There's going to be a $10,000 tax on it each year. And I think that vintage guitars people are going to be like, I don't really care what it is. I just want it to be good and be mine. That's my personal thought, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But I do know one thing. The handmade, custom-built, this is your guitar is going to be hotter than ever because people love the idea of being able to walk in and say, this is what I want. I loved this specific shape. I loved this sound. I love this paint job from back then. Can we do this? Can we do that? And put this there and this and that and this. And boom, I've got my own guitar. I know for myself, for years I was into vintage stuff. Watches, guitars, amps, and everything. And now I'm really into new stuff. I love new watches. I love new cars. And I love new guitars. It's just something about, okay, this is the best that's out there right now, and I'm going to give it my own patina, my own fucking nicks and dings, and the only thing it's going to be missing is all that years of guitar or cigarette smoke, because that doesn't exist anymore. That is, I believe, one of the key ingredients on a great vintage guitar, just years of shit cigarette smoke and sweat drove into that wood and the pickups. Other than that, though, some of these people are building shit that'll just knock you out. Anyway, that's a long-winded introduction to part 2 of Grover, but it was really, really an honor to talk to him, and I just love this man and his history. I don't think anybody's done anything what he's done. You had the big 2 companies. I've said it before. You had Fender and you had Gibson, and they're killing it, and they're the 2 daddies of guitars. And you had a little sprinkling companies here and there, and then all of a sudden, 79, 80, it was a perfect storm. You had Eddie Van Halen, and you had Charvel, and you had the guitar hero. And that's lightning in a bottle. And then, boom, you have the Los Angeles music scene. Well, here we go. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on iTunes. Keep the candles lit. And enjoy part 2 right here, Grover Jackson.
And me and you're you. There we go.
So,
what are we doing? Where did we leave off?
We left off kind of at the Randy Rhoads guitar being made.
Yep.
The Jackson brand has been launched, and you're now about to kind of explode. What happens to Charvel in this time? Are you selling thousands of guitars a month? How many employees do you got? All of this. What's going on there?
Well, but between, let's say, 80 and, say, 87, we went from a core group of, I'm just guessing now because the numbers are sort of, it was a stream, not a thing. In 80, it was probably 10 or 12 guys at the most. And by 87, 88, it was 135 people.
Wow.
We had moved from the original building was 1,200 square feet. Then we added 1,000 square feet. Then we moved the 12 and the 1,000 into 2,400. And then the 1,400, we added 4,800. Then we took the 4,800 and the 2,400 and moved it into 28,000 square feet in Ontario. So that's somewhere around 1985 is when we left the San Dimas Glendora area and moved to Ontario, to the big building. And that was sort of the beginning of the end, really. And in the early 80s, Los Angeles became, Mecca. It was the center of the known universe. And so I'm gonna segue. And I'm sorry, I ramble a lot, but in that window of time, probably 84, I'd have to look back. It would be able to, we could document it. There was a band from Nashville called Steeler.
Oh, yeah.
Steeler became Keel.
Yep.
And as I recall, the guitar player in the band, when they came up from Nashville, don't remember his name, he had gotten a guitar from me, and I was sort of the merit badge. If you were in L.A., if you had a Jackson or a Charvel, that meant you were serious.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the emblem. You put it on your shirt, and it was like, oh, yeah, I got the thing, so I'm real. And apparently this young fella's family, I think, were fairly well-to-do, and he came out and spent a year or so playing in Steeler and with the band, and the story, as I recall it, was that the parents said, hey, come home and get an education. Stop that rock and roll crap. Right? And so he fucked off and went home to get an education, be an attorney or something. And they were out of a guitar player. And so they needed a guitar player. And Mike Varney was sort of the source.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine, good friend of mine. He was on the show.
Mr. Varney. So they called him and said, hey, we need a guitar player. And he says, well, I got this kid in Sweden, They had the guy come over, Yngve Malmsteen.
Yep.
And he was here about a week. They said, well, you got to get a real guitar. I mean, you're in L.A. now. You can't play that dumb Stratocaster, so you've got to get a real guitar. So they called, made an appointment, came out after hours, and it was Ron Keel and one of the other boys, I think maybe the bass player, and Yngve, just out of Europe, okay? And so I set him down and I handed him a guitar, and he says, yeah, that's nice. And I handed him another guitar. Yeah, that's okay. And the third guitar, yeah, that's pretty good. I go, well, so maybe you could tell me what it is that you're looking for. What is it that what you have now that's not working for you? We can dial it in. He says, well, nothing. I love my guitar. So I turned to Keel and this other guy and I said, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
Leave this kid alone. He's fine. He ain't broken. And I like to think that I've had a fairly warm relationship with Yngve over the years because I didn't hustle him. I didn't need the work. I didn't need to sell another guitar. He wasn't a big star. If he wanted something, I was happy to make it for him. But I didn't proselytize. I didn't try to convert. And I think he appreciated the fact that I just said, okay, you're fine. Come back if something gets out of whack and you need some help. I'm perfectly willing to help. But right now, it ain't broken. Don't fix it.
Yeah.
They ended up leaving that, and my buddy Jimmy Waldo had the band Alcatraz, and he became the guitar player in Alcatraz, and then Steve Vine, blah, 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 blah. But I don't know how I got onto that. I'm sorry.
How do you differentiate between Charvel and Jackson once you're running both?
Charvels were bolt-ons, and Jacksons were neck to the bodies.
There it is. Okay, cool.
Okay, so we're climbing the ladder. I mean, we're growing 40, 50% a year. I come from a very middle-class, blue-collar working family. Didn't finish high school. My senior year, I was in Florida playing in a band. Not completely stupid, but not very educated. And my people, nobody in my family had ever had any money. So now all of a sudden we get to 83, 84. We're doing $1.5 million, $2 million. There's 50, 60 people headed to 100 and whatever it is. And the truth is, I didn't understand what I now call the mechanics of money.
Yeah.
I was product savvy, because I'd owned all the vintage guitars that we talked about before. So I had an idea what a good guitar was, and I was learning how to fabricate that thing from a consumer of that thing to being a producer of that thing. I was in a pretty heavy learning curve at that point. Tooling, fixturing, machinery it's getting ready to start evolving because there were no CNC machines. But I didn't understand money at all. So I was broke. $1 million backlog of guitars and no money in the bank.
Wow.
Broke. Like the early days, except that we now had some cash flow. But if I would get an extra $100, I'd buy a tool. I wouldn't try to figure out where was the best application of money. You know, 2 times in that era, the IRS walked in and said, "We're getting ready to close the doors. We're going to have a marshal out here to lock the door," because I hadn't paid taxes.
Oh, wow.
It's one of those things that small entrepreneurial businesses do. You know, you have $1,000 come in. I can pay the employees, I can buy material, or I can pay the taxes. Well, the taxes is sort of like this invisible hammer of God that's up in the air somewhere, and it's invisible, but the employees are real. I need wood to build guitars. So you take the $1,000 and you apply it where you think it's most needed, not realizing that when that hammer of God hits you, you are dead meat. And it happened twice. And both times I worked out a payment plan and got us out of it. But it shows my complete naivete about the mechanics of money and how you have to manage money. I would have honestly, in those days, been better off to raise prices. We were already sort of at the top of the food chain, but I probably should have raised prices, and I probably should have screwed the vendors around, which is horrible to say, and I hate saying that, but that hammer of God hurts when it hits you. But I didn't understand any of that. I was living, with my nose pressed up against the glass. I need people here tomorrow morning to work, and I need material, and the IRS is invisible to me. So we got through those hard times. The bottom line is that we didn't have a tremendous amount of margin, and we were growing very rapidly. 1985, Fender is now out of the marketplace. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that there was a window of, a year, 18 months, when Bill Schultz and his group of investors bought Fender from CBS. They apparently had no intention of making USA guitars. Fender at Valencia and Raymond in Fullerton was closed. The only Fender that existed in the world at that time was a warehouse in Brea, California, where they warehoused Fujigangaki guitars made in Japan. I was sitting on top of a brand name, Charvel, more than Jackson at that point. Charvel, that was, a Panzer tank. We were just running all over the market anywhere we wanted to go. Well, there's 2 guys in Fort Worth, Texas, had a company called International Music Company, IMC, and they realized what the potential was. And actually through a mutual friend of ours, Gary Kaler, which is I should tell that story at some point about Kaler and the Kaler Bridge, but we'll get back to that if we can. Kaler called up and says, these 2 guys have diagnosed what your situation is, A, that you're dumb, and number 2, that you have no money. And so what they're getting ready to do is come out. They've had conversations with Wayne Charvel, and they're basically, I am the legal owner of the Charvel trademark. They're getting ready to bring Charvel guitars in from Asia and dump cheap Charvels into the marketplace and just dare you to sue them. They were just going to run over me. So in a fit of some kind of genius, I guess, I called him up and I said, so I understand you're getting ready to make this deal with Wayne Charvel. Why don't you just make a deal with me since I own the trademark? I flew for Fort Worth, Texas, and met with them, made a deal. I licensed them the Charvel brand name for guitars made in Asia. Unbeknownst to me, they had no intention of paying the royalty.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So very, very carefully, when we first made the deal, they laid it on the table and said, well, if you ever want to merge with us, we could do that. We'd actually prefer that, but we'll pay you a 10% royalty on Asian-made guitars. And I went, oh, okay. Again, I am a business knucklehead. I don't know nothing, right? 7-8 months later, as they're preparing to introduce the Charvel guitars, I realized they have no intention of paying me the royalties. Okay, I was getting ready to get screwed again. So I merged 100% of my company, which was at that point about a $3.5 million a year company, with their company, which was about a $27 million a year company. And I became a stockholder in IMC. I had, I think it was 16% of the company. The problem with that was that now, instead of me being the captain of the ship, I was a minority shareholder. So if the two of them wanted to do something, I had no say in it.
Right. You're only 16%.
Yeah. So the senior partner was a guy named Tommy Moore, who just passed away last year. And I think I have to take a second and describe this guy. Tommy Moore was a guy who grew up in a pawn shop in Fort Worth, Texas. His dad had a pawn shop. Had gone to the Korean War and flown fighters in the Korean War. Very proud of napalming people to death. I mean, he thought that was just great fun. 5'2", maybe 5'1", 5'2". Very fond of wearing, a sidearm. I mean, he liked to carry. Okay, and sort of sounded like Ross Perot. So came home after the Korean War. He flew for Air America, which I think was the CIA. Came home, went to, I think, Texas A&M and got a degree in international finance and banking. So what you had was a guy, you had Yosemite Sam with an education, and he was really dangerous. He was a guy that loved lawsuits, loved to stitch people up, okay? Very, very aggressive guy. But now he was my guy because, we were on the same team, theoretically. And the first year or two of me being a part of them, 85, this all happened in the fall of 85, and that's when we introduced Charvel and sold millions. My obligation in that part of the conversation was that I would go to Asia and try to make the guitars good, and so that they were the best quality guitars we could get. And whatever credit I get historically, I think one of the things that I would be the most willing to accept credit for is that I think I was the first guy that walked into a Japanese factory. Japanese manufacturing today is decimated, okay, because everybody's kept looking for cheaper and cheaper guitars. It moved, from Japan to China and India and Indonesia and a lot of places. But so there's a much smaller Japanese musical instrument manufacturing industry today than there was then. It was very vibrant in the mid-'80s. But I was the first guy that ever walked in and said, price is a consideration, but I want quality. And they didn't know what I was talking about. I mean, because the American buyers who had come to Japan prior to that was just cheap. And I went in and said, no, I want a factory, Chushingaki, to be a captive factory. They were making BC Riches, and they were making Vantage, and they were making Washburns. They were making a lot of stuff. I said, you got to throw all of those people out. I'm going to impart some kind of knowledge to you about making guitars, Chushingaki, and I want that to be proprietary to what we do. The bottom line is that over the next several years, as we raise the level of quality, and those Japanese Charvels are still fairly highly regarded today. If you look on eBay or places, I mean, people still find value in those guitars. But the industry as a whole, the quality level began to rise as a result, I think, of me going to Chushingaki. I'll take credit for that.
So
I don't know if
so
anybody
throughout the
else
industry, like Ibanez and all that stuff going on.
Yeah. Ibanez was at Yamaha. Ibanez was at Fujigangaki, as was Fender. Hoshino, I think, owns a piece of Fujigangaki, which is a beautiful factory. I mean, old, but you can eat off the floor. Just exquisite factory, old school craftsmanship place. Yamaha had several factories, but I think Yamaha at that point was already looking to move out of Japan. They sort of foresaw things. I spent time at Terada, which eventually Terada did not work, and Terada ended up going bankrupt. There's a lot of factories that are gone now that I was in and saw, and it was a revelation. Yeah, again, I'm a bumpkin, right? So my wife and I went to Japan the first time, I think probably 82, and I had this very naive idea that there was a machine in Japan, and they took a log, and they stuck a log in the front end of this machine, and 10 seconds later, a strung-up guitar pooped out the back end of this.
You thought that even though you were building them?
That's how dumb I was, right? So you get there and you find out that they made things the exact same way we made things. It's just that they worked in very limited specifications and in very large quantities.
Right.
So again, this was a huge education for me. I have a whole library of photography of factories, but because every one of those factories I went through, I was like taking pictures like crazy because I wanted to learn how do you make this stuff at a high level, but at an affordable cost.
Right. Some of that stuff was next level, like the Yamaha SG3000s.
Yep.
That stuff is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And at the time, Gibson was not very good. So Yamaha and Ibanez were smoking.
Yeah.
Coming out with serious quality stuff. The Paul Stanley, the Iceman.
I think that's a little bit later, but yeah, basically, yeah.
Right.
And Fuji's a beautiful factory. And that was my first choice to go there, and they wouldn't have us. Right. Because they thought that it would impinge on Ibanez. And actually, they were making some Yamaha in those days, too. It's very funny in those days, the Japanese factories were very collegial. I mean, they competed, but I was told in those days that there was a monthly meeting at Nagoya, once a month. All the Japanese manufacturers got together and sat down, and they sort of sliced and diced the pie. So that's Japan Inc., I think is what they called it back in the 80s. I have a library of probably 100 Japanese books, history of Japan and Japanese manufacturing techniques and all of this stuff, because I was trying to learn. Yeah. And
Japan makes some of the greatest stuff ever right now. Denim, all the clothing that comes out of there, eyewear. Yeah. These guys are killing it. They just basically came over, saw America getting lazy, and just said, let's still make crazy good stuff.
It's that, and then I certainly am not a banker, okay? Yeah. So I'm just going to give you an opinion about that. A foretelling of what could happen now. My understanding of the way banking worked in Japan in those days was that the Japanese government had decided we want to be a major world force, so we're going to encourage exports, and to that end, they basically relaxed banking rules to the point where a guy'd go into the bank and say, hey, I got an idea. I'm going to make toothbrushes, and I need $1 million to set up a factory to do toothbrushes. And so the bank would give him the $1 million, and a year later he'd come back and go, that didn't work. So now I'm going to make shoelaces, and I need $1 million to do that. And so the bank would say, well, you lost $1 million, and he would go, yeah, I know, but now I got it. Okay, well, here's another $1 million. Now in the United States, the federal banking regulators would come into the bank and go, hey, bank. I love the euphemism that they have. Non-performing assets. No, bitch, you lost the money. It's gone. Yeah. In this country, the federal banking regulators, if the bank did that enough times, they'd close the bank, right? Because the bank's loaning money and not going to ever be able to pay it back. Right. In Japan, what they did was, because the government wanted exports, they just shoved that under a carpet. And nobody ever said, hey, you've lost hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's like gambling. You just keep going until somebody hits it. Like, oh, my God.
And about 1990 is when it started with a real estate crisis in Japan. But that's the reason Japan went through 10, 15 years of recession/depression, because at some point, I mean, I have read one report that said that they may have had as much as $5 trillion of losses, unrecognized losses. Well, at some point, somebody's got to say, hey, the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
So you take that model and superimpose that over China today. And I'm no geopolitical expert, but it seems like that's the kind of thing that's going on in China now, is that China wants exports. They want to control the global market. So the Chinese government underwrites things whether it works or not. Well, at someday you either have to take over the world, or you have to say, wait a minute, we've lost trillions of dollars.
Right.
So we have a real problem looming in the future, I think. And again, probably people will probably say, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And that's okay. I don't.
At this time, are
Yeah.
you still making American Charvels?
No. When
Okay.
Charvel went to Japan, sorry, I rambled off.
No, it's all good.
85, the distinction between Charvel and Jackson up until 1985 was Charvel was bolt-on and Jackson was neck to the body. When we took Charvel to Japan, Charvel became an import brand, bolt-on and neck to the body, and Jackson became the domestic U.S. brand, bolt-on and neck to the body.
Did IMC, were they partners with you on the Jackson stuff?
Yeah,
Oh,
because
so-
when I merged with them,
Yeah, so it was both
it was all
things.
in. Well, and you have to imagine, again, I come from this very modest background, and up until that time, because there was no cash flow, I'm selling seconds out the back door to eat.
Wow.
I'm driving a 1963 Chevrolet Bel Air with Bondo on it that I called La Bamba. Okay? That's how I
You're
live.
not getting any of the 16% kick? They're just
No, this is before the
before that.
merge.
Okay,
Before
gotcha.
the merge.
Got ya.
Okay? So the company is selling guitars to every rock star you can imagine. Okay? We have this high profile. I'm still broke, personally broke, driving La Bamba. Merge with IMC, I immediately went to $150,000 a year and all of the expenses that I could eat, shit, or throw away.
Wow.
So I'm flying first class, I'm staying in big hotels, and life is pretty good for old Grover.
Yeah.
150 grand a year in 1985 money was a lot of money.
Yeah.
The problem with that, and I've described this many times over the years, is that the money becomes something that you use as an anesthetic, to anesthesia. I'm miserable now because I'm not in control of what I'm doing. I am a control freak. I could go to an AA meeting, stand up and go, hi, my name is Grover. I'm a control freak. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't have a drug problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I have a control problem. Okay? And I'll admit that. And so now I had turned control of my business that I had sweat blood to build over to two guys in Texas. And it was miserable. And you cover the misery up, I'll buy a Rolex watch. See how smart I am? I've got a Rolex watch.
I've been there, man. I've been there.
And that feels good for about a week or two.
Yeah.
And then the anesthesia wears off, and you go, wait a minute, I just remembered, I'm fucking miserable.
Yeah.
I'll buy a Mercedes.
Yeah.
That's bigger. Certainly that'll make me feel good. Look what a smart guy I am. Okay? I've got a Mercedes. I'll buy a bigger house. I'll take a vacation someplace. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so by 1989, I am maybe at one of the lowest spots in my life. The marriage with the wife I had at the time was disintegrating. And then MTV turned the water off, the electricity off, turned the lights off on metal. They just said, that's not cool no more. We don't want no more of that. And so LA went from being the center of the known universe to the asshole of the known universe. And everybody was leaving LA, and rock stars are losing houses and cars, and it really not on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine anymore. And I'm right in the middle of that. I'm drowning with everybody else. So that's when I sold my last portion of the business and left. Moved to Beverly Hills. I was living in Benedict Canyon and had a studio in Motown Hitsville Studios in West Hollywood. down in the basement, and I had fun there. I had a lot of fun there. Lost a shit ton of money. Bought a Synclavier and a director disc, and worked on a lot of horror movies, and did dialogue editing and sound effects with the Synclavier.
Oh, so you're out of the biz completely?
For 3 years.
Wow.
I had a non-compete. When I left, they had a non-compete on me, and I had to stay away.
Wow.
And I'm trying to recover emotionally from not being Grover Jackson of Grover Jackson.
Well, you're a lot like the 80s guys, the rock stars.
Absolutely.
And they're just, I call them kind of tumbleweeds. They're blowing around like, what happened? You know, the gold.
Did somebody get the number of that truck?
Yeah. The gold was gone.
Yep.
And people just did not know what to do. They thought it was going to last forever, which I always thought was really weird to think that would last forever.
I'm not sure that anybody even thought it would last forever.
Yeah.
They didn't think. I didn't think.
Well, it went by so fast.
It was a very heady atmosphere. I spent 3 years in the studio business, which was one of the great. Although I was miserable and confused, emotionally damaged from not being the Grover Jackson of Jackson Charvel anymore, but I was having fun. I mean, we did fun stuff, did sound effects and dialogue editing, did Grammy performance editing on a little box that Kai made called a DD1000. It was a digital recorder editor that I did for Boys to Men. Worked on some Bruce Springsteen stuff, very little bit of Bruce Springsteen stuff, because that's when he did those 2 records without the E Street Band.
Lucky Town and yep.
Yeah, he did those at Soundworks.
92, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I was there. Walter Becker was there. Steely Dan was not working, and Walter Becker. The chief engineer of the studio was Roger Nichols, the great Roger Nichols, who 4-time Grammy winner, who subsequently passed away sadly, and was one of the greatest people I ever met. So I got to watch genius at work and be in that really heady environment, but still emotionally trying to deal with the damage
and a divorce.
And a new marriage.
Oh wow.
It was a crazy. It took a long time for me to kind of settle back.
So you get, after this happens, your non-compete wears out. Is this when you go to Washburn and start working with Dimebag?
That's when Leandra, my older daughter, was born and moved to the non-compete ran out. The studio went bankrupt. Soundworks went bankrupt. Huge, blazing failure. And I went to Chicago and ran Washburn for 3 years.
How does this happen? Do they call you?
No, my old partner, Jerry Freed, from IMC, had left because IMC had folded up. That's a longer story. And he was, at that time, working for SKB Cases as their international salesman. And I called him and I said, hey, I need a job.
When they fold, who grabs the Jackson Charvel brands?
Okay, so let's go there. It's funny. I just told somebody this story because almost nobody knows the story.
Yeah,
I mean, and I'm maybe the only person alive that knows the story. So in '87 is when we had the stock market crash, right?
Yeah,
we had the company sold in '87. Tommy had rounded up Citicorp and a venture capital firm called Berkeley International. And we had the company sold for $12 million because we realized that the cash flow was wrong. I was in Hong Kong on my way to India the day that they were going to sign the papers for Berkeley and Citicorp to buy, I think it was 90% of the company. We were going to keep a token interest. The three of us were going to keep token interest. But Berkeley and Citicorp were paying $12 million for the bulk of the company. That's the day the stock market crashed.
Wow.
The story goes, again, I was in Hong Kong, but the story goes that they were in Dallas in the attorney's office, big, long conference table with paperwork, and everybody was supposed to go down one side, sign, down on the other side, sign. One of the attorneys ran in and just scooped the paperwork up and ran out of the office. And that was the end of us selling IMC for $12 million. A year later, in late '88, Tommy got Berkeley and Citicorp back to the table, and we sold the company for $6 million.
Still not bad.
So, well, it wasn't too bad, except that in late '88, early '89, there was a board of directors meeting, and Tommy said to the new owners, hey, by the way, guys, things are not going so great. You're going to need to put some money into the company, or we're going to have to file bankruptcy. And they said, well, okay, fuck you. We just gave you $6 million. If, a loan is going to fix the company, we'll pay you interest. You loan the money back to the company. And Tommy said, well, no, you bought the company. You did your due diligence. Yeah, you're right. But either you loan the money back, or we'll take our staff attorneys and sue you until you burn up that $6 million we just gave you. So we gave them, I think it was about $4 million of the $6 million back.
Damn.
And lost every nickel of it.
Yeah.
So in late 89, early 90, January 1st, 1990, I left the company. I just said, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. The industry had changed because of changing, musical demographic, and that's the reason I just got away from it for 3 years. I needed to try to cool my head out. I was just distraught.
And then who comes in and scoops the brands?
So Berkeley and City, and the way big finance does these kinds of deals commonly is they'll have a group of private investors that they'll offer a piece of it to, and so that they can mitigate, the potential damage if something goes wrong. They've given a little piece to whoever wants to buy in, right? The big pieces went to Berkeley and Citicorp, but then there were smaller pieces. One of the smaller pieces was a guy named Jim Paulos. Jim Paulos was a Dallas investor who had been involved in the steel business and made a lot of money, and was an investor. Citicorp would go to him and say, hey, you want to buy a little chunk of this or a little chunk of that, and again, sort of mitigate the risk. So he was one of the buyers. They bought the company in late 89, early 89. By 90, late 90 and early 91, the company was just plummeting. I'm gone, okay? Citicorp and Berkeley International were going to bankrupt the company, and Paulos bought it for $2 million. I think $2 million bucks. Somewhere.
Charvel Jackson?
Akai.
Akai. Oh,
the whole thing.
The whole
IMC
thing.
was Ross speaker cabinets. It was Hondo guitars.
Oh.
It was Rhythm Band, which made clickers and clackers and knockers for grammar school. And it was Jackson and Charvel, and it was Akai, and maybe one or two other things I'm not thinking of. So Paulos bought the whole thing, let his son run it for a couple of years. At the same time, there's a guy in Hong Kong named James Henry Ting. You can look him up. I did. When I told this story recently, I went and looked it up. It's on Wikipedia. James Henry Ting was a financial wizard in Hong Kong. He owned Singer Sewing Machine. He owned a European industrial company called Fan Steel. He owned Konghua, which at the time was the largest manufacturer of televisions in the world, in Hong Kong, somewhere in Shenzhen. And Akai was also going through problems in Japan. So he bought Akai. And one of the things that Mr. Ting liked to do was own the distributorship of the brands he owned. So he ended up buying Akai, and Jackson and Charvel were thrown in on the deal. So the ownership passed from James Paulos. It had gone from Berkeley Citicorp and Jim Paulos to Jim Paulos, and then from Jim Paulos to Semitech Global, which was Ting's company operating umbrella. And that it sat in Chinese ownership for a couple of years. The interest, and this is on Wikipedia. Semitech Global ended up getting caught essentially kiting. You know what kiting is?
Nope.
Kiting is when you take $100 and you go to the bank and you open a banking account and they give you checks, and you go to another bank and you open a bank account with one of those checks for $1,000, and then you go to a third bank and you open it with one of the checks from the second bank, and you open a bank account with $10,000. So basically, you're working on imaginary money.
Yeah, you're bouncing all over.
Correct. What Ting was doing was he would loan money from Singer to Fan Steel, and then Fan Steel to Akai, and from Akai to Konghua, and Konghua to, and it was just a circle jerk, and he got caught. They threw him off the Hang Seng Index. He's lucky he stayed out of jail. But that put Akai in play.
Just out in like
and
no
Jackson
man's land?
Charvel.
Right.
Just put all those brands in play, and that's when Fender bought it.
Wow. there
Fender
it is.
bought it from Semitech Global.
Wow. And now they're making Jackson and Charvels, because I know they got the Charvels.
Yes, yeah, they make both. And apparently
right here in America?
Most of it's made offshore. I mean, there still is a Jackson custom shop. They didn't have a Charvel custom shop for a while. I think they do now.
Right.
In fact, I know they do. But most of it, I mean, they do. I mean, you can go and buy a Jackson guitar at Guitar Center for $199.
Yeah, I see those. Yeah.
Those are really El Kabongs is what those are.
So now you're in Chicago.
Yep.
You're working at Washburn.
Yep.
And Dimebag was a Dean guy for years. What happens here?
So one of my crew, the crew that I had at Washburn, were a good portion of them were ex-Hamer guys.
Amazing brand.
Amazing
of good guys.
brand. A bunch of good guys. One of them was a guy named Mike Sherman, who still has. When they moved Hamer from Chicago to New England to the Ovation facility, which they eventually did, Sherman went up there. Now I think he has his own little company making basses, high-end basses. He's a good bass player. His girlfriend was the caterer on the Pantera tours. And she kept telling him, hey, Dime's old Dean has become so road-weary, it's undependable.
Yeah.
I mean, he just beat the guitar to death. And so Pantera came through Chicago. They played Alpine Valley, the place where Stevie Ray famously passed away. And so we drove up there, somewhere in Wisconsin, Alpine Valley. And I met with Dean, and we hit it with Dime, and we just hit it off immediately, and made the first couple of guitars. And he played Washburns for a while. I don't get any credit. There's some histories out there on the internet with other people taking credit for that. It's not true. I went to Alpine Valley. He and I met. He and I decided what we were going to make. I have the prototype neck.
Really?
I have it. Yeah.
Wow, that's a cool piece of history.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty crappy because it was only partially finished because we saw the mistake we made, and but I have an actual artifact from the window of time.
When he came to you, what was he asking? Okay, here's my Dean. We know he plays the Dean. Did he say, this is what I like about Dean, this is what I don't like?
Yep.
What didn't he like?
Well, he liked almost everything.
Right.
He it was his guitar. I mean,
it was.
And so the Washburns that we made, the neck shape, everything was meant to be basically, there wasn't much innovation to that guitar.
Right. It was just a
documentation of what he was already doing.
Right. Was Dean gone by then?
Yes. Okay, so let's do that. So, and Dean Zielinski is a friend of mine. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but my wife and I would go over to his house for dinner and stuff. I mean, we were very friendly, and I love Dean. Okay, he's a crazy guy, but he's great. Dean was one of the earliest of the sort of high-end boutique-y brands that went to Asia for whatever reason. Ended up with problems, whether it was quality control problems coming from Asia or whether it was he overbought for what he could sell, ended up in bankruptcy. And owed a guy named Jack Westheimer, Westheimer Corporation, which is Mighty Might, owed them quite a bit of money. And so Jack ended up in the bankruptcy with the Dean name and sat on it for a while. And then ultimately, Jack sold it to a guy named Oscar Medeiros in Miami. Oscar Medeiros owned a company called Tropical Music, and it was his intention to resuscitate the Dean brand. The story, as I heard it, was that Oscar was also rep for Peavey in South America. And Hartley Peavey found out that Oscar had this brand and was going to use it to make guitars, and Hartley basically said, Sonny, you can't do that. And so Oscar sold it to Oh my goodness, I can't. He's passed away now. Died of brain cancer about 3 years ago.
Whoa.
And his son is running Dean today. Anyway, how Dean got from Chicago to Miami, from Miami to Tampa. That's how that happened.
So while they were gone, that's why Dime went Washburn.
When Oscar owned it, but wasn't able to do anything with it before he sold it, and that's when Dime showed up. So we weren't knocking Dean off. There was no Dean in the marketplace. The brand existed, but there was no product. There was no sales. There was no nothing.
Yeah.
Can I go back for just a second?
Yep.
DB, Dime, is one of the people that I like to talk about the most.
Yeah.
He was just the greatest guy ever. Okay, we went to Australia together. We did in-stores all over the country. Sometimes famous people, I'll leave it like that, who do public events can be very temperamental. You know, I'm here for an hour. At the end of the hour, I don't care how many people are here, I'm leaving. They're signing pictures. It's, what's your name? Bill. Okay, Bill, here. And they hand you a picture and shuffle you off. And the people around shuffle you off. Dime was the absolute opposite of that. If 5 people showed up because it wasn't promoted properly, he'd spend 2 hours with 5 people, and they would leave thinking they had a new best friend, okay? If 500 people showed up and he had an hour, he would stay there until he'd seen every single person that showed up. He had an unbelievable sort of Texas larger-than-life kind of personality where he would do shtick. And every single person that would walk up, he had a comment, he had a joke, he had a gift, he had something different for every single, and it seemed to be endless. Okay, hey, I got a beer. You want a beer? Here, let's share a beer. You drink this beer. You take a drink, then I'll take a drink. And I mean, it just never stopped. He was like a machine, and people walked away from meeting Darryl thinking they'd met a person, not a cardboard cutout with a magic marker in its hand. He was amazing to watch. So my thing about that is I don't think I've ever known anybody that appreciated his fans any more than Darryl. He was just magnificent at that. He was just great fun. He was just the warmest, most honest, decent. He was real people, man.
Well, he's the product of same as me. You saw Kiss and you're like, wow, I've got to do this. Yeah. And if you do get to do it for a living, you're like, I can't believe I get to do this.
Yeah.
And you never forget how lucky you are.
Right.
And that is truly.
Well, fame and wealth tends to draw you away from that. You know,
course.
At some point you start to feel like you're entitled. He never had entitlement.
Yeah.
He stayed. See, a lot of people, I think, would, and this is a big topic with me, a lot of people would think that you want to escape blue-collar background. I don't want to escape that. I don't want to be intellectual. I want to try to stay grounded to people.
That's why AC/DC is so big.
I saw that. Yeah. That popped up on my thing. I'm so jealous. I've never seen them. I've never talked to them.
Wow.
And that I idolize them.
Well, look at them. 50 years in the business, and they did my podcast.
Yeah.
They don't need to do that shit.
No.
But then when they do it full on. Each band member, an hour of talking, full conversations, not like next or anything. Fully engaged and
blue collar. Man, salt of the earth.
Oh yeah. Not even one inkling that they have actual $1 billion business. You know?
I don't doubt that it is, but I mean
those are the type of people that like the Ramones. They just go on.
Keith Richards.
Yeah, same
thing. The Midnight Rambler.
Yeah.
That's one of the great regrets of my life is I never made a guitar for Keith.
Damn.
That is something I will regret to my grave because he's Keith. He's the Midnight Rambler. He's the guy. So, and a quick thing. The last time I saw Ronnie Van Zant live, I think we talked about Skinner.
Yeah.
he was out here. It was his birthday, and somebody. This is one of those little things that sticks in my head. It was his birthday, and somebody had given him a Merle Haggard songbook, and he was carrying it with him everywhere, and it meant so much to him. That connection. Merle was, a man of the people, a blue-collar guy.
Yeah.
And Ronnie was so infatuated with this book of Merle Haggard songs. That's a connection you wouldn't normally make,
right. Right.
But blue-collar,
So look at here. You're getting ready to move.
Yeah.
You're moving to Nashville?
You started to talk about GJ2. I don't know how much time we have left.
GJ2.
So I can probably do that one pretty quick.
Cool.
So, and it shows the whimsical nature of things. I'll try to get that across. 2011, the girls, my daughters, had gotten, Leandra had her first car, so I was not responsible for oatmeal and carrying people to school and, stuff like that. I mean, they had become semi-autonomous. And I'm back doing programming. I'm not running Rickenbacker. I'm in as a consultant doing programming for them. And I run into a guy named John Gold, who had been an executive vice president at Fender for 12 years and had been a management change, and he got ousted. And so I run into him at NAMM show and the Rickenbacker booth, and what are you doing? I don't know, what are you doing? Why don't we start a guitar company? And the sort of chains were off my ankles so that I could do something because I wasn't tied to, being there for the girls 24/7. So we went out and raised a shit ton of money and started GJ2. And over the next 4.5 years, we managed to piss away almost $1 million. Couldn't find a voice. Couldn't find a seat at the table. And we had the pedigree of whatever I'd done. He had the connections of whatever he'd done. And it really sort of is an explanation of or an emblem of the changing nature of the guitar business. I mean, for 75, 90 years, producer produced musical instrument product sold to either retailer or distributor or retailer, sold to retailer or sold to public. And what's happened in the last few years, whether it's the Apple phenomenon or whatever, is products are now produced by producers and sold direct to consumers. And the old model of going through a retail chain is breaking down. And we didn't recognize that. We didn't address that in any kind of a meaningful way. And as a result, the guitars were quite good. The people who bought them loved them. But we couldn't catch any cachet. And so in the fall of 2015, started in 2015, we were bankrupt in every sense of the word except going to the courthouse and filing the documents. And I realized I was going to have to go back to making stuff for people because that's what I know how to do. I thought, let's go through the 2016 NAMM show and just see if lightning strikes, but I'm going to hedge my bet by trying to see if I can't find something to do. Went in to meet the guy who runs Friedman 10 times. 9 times he wouldn't see me. The 10th time, I got an audience with this fella, and I shook my finger in his face, and I said, I can make your guitars. And in April, I got the first PO. In May, I made the first guitars, and we're several $1,000 guitars later now. It's been a great relationship for both of us. Post that NAMM show in 16, in February, I just had to sit down with my partner, John Gold, and say, look, this is over. And so GJ2 is essentially ended in the spring of 2016. And the primary thing that we do has been Friedman, although we do Tosin Abasi, we do some stuff for Sasha Dunable, we do stuff for a bunch of other people. But the primary thing for the last 4.5 years has been Friedman, and we've been enormously successful. And they're wonderful guitars, and they've been very warmly received by the public. Are they substantially different than GJ2s? They really aren't. It's the same machinery, the same tooling, the same people, same everything. Somehow, that's this whimsical thing that you can take two products and put one brand name on one and one brand name on the other, and one works and one doesn't work. And I don't understand that. I don't understand what that voodoo is. But I'm happy that Friedman has done as well as it has. And I mean, there's really nice videos. People are very, very happy with those guitars. So today, Friedman has a seat at the table where GJ2 could not get a seat at the table.
And so you're moving.
I am moving. I should get the okay from the bank tomorrow to move to Crossville, Tennessee. I'm from Chattanooga. Crossville's about 80 miles from Chattanooga. Yeah, gonna try to get to a little bit less active atmosphere.
Yeah, just chill.
Just chill. Yeah. I've been working 7 days a week for so long I can't remember, and I'm 71. I need to slow down a little bit. I don't want to quit. I hopefully I'll be able to work right till the end of my life.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do it 7 days a week. I need to pull the reins back a little bit.
I get it. You burn it up so much, man. You're like, wow.
There's things what I call intellectual curiosities that I want to investigate, which frets and truss rods are two of the things with guitars that are basically pretty archaic. I'd like to have a chance to have some meditation time about and see if there's something innovative that I still have to contribute to guitars rather than just replicating what we've been doing. Hopefully Tennessee will allow me that opportunity for introspection and come up with some stuff that's cool.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
I got a question I forgot to ask you on part one.
Okay.
Who came up with the star body? That was the first Charvel I had.
Jimmy Bates. Remember I talked about Jimmy Bates, the guy in Stormer?
Yeah.
He took an Explorer, went to the bandsaw, and cut a chunk out of it.
Really?
Yep. That was Jimmy Bates. God bless his heart. He's gone, died last year. We used to call him Master Bates. He was a good guy. He was a great guitar player and a really good guy. But he was the first person that took an Explorer body. I think it was just a body. It wasn't one of those Ibanez ones. It was just a bolt-on Explorer body. I went to the bandsaw and cut a chunk out of it.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing the show.
Thank you.
It's been an honor to talk to you, man. I think some of those early Charvels and the early Jacksons are some of the greatest guitars ever made. You got the 50s Fenders and Gibsons. And then the 70s is just kind of this shit show of quality out there. And then here comes Charvel and then Jackson, and the whole thing changes. And I think it also kicked those giant companies in the ass to try to make some good stuff again.
Well, I think it did. I think you're right about that. You know, it's funny. A friend of mine who's a collector picked up a guitar about a year and a half ago. Very unusual artwork. Early guitar, maybe 81 or 82, I don't remember. And I happened to be up in the valley, and he said, here, I got to show you this. And he showed me the guitar, and it really was really good. Crude because of the methodologies of the time, okay? I mean, from that sort of a technocrat point of view, you look at it and go, geez, this looks like Fred Flintstone made this. But it 40 years old and played incredible, felt incredible, sounded really great. So there was, I think the thing that drove me the craziest in that window of time was our inability to replicate that. Because, and this is one of those things that I think everybody goes through, whether they were willing to acknowledge it or not, is that some are really great, some are real turds, and a lot are right in the middle.
Just like Gibson 59s. Everybody thinks, it's a 59, so it's automatically going to be the greatest ever. There's a bunch of duds out there.
There are.
You even said it in part one. You said, to tell you the truth, I sold it because it was a fucking dud.
Yeah. Beautiful. Absolutely exquisite. But not a great guitar.
Yeah.
And whatever, and that is so elusive. because what's a great guitar to you might not be a great guitar to me. So it's hard to make those. It's always an opinion of yourself. Of what you like.
Right.
Although I think there's some instruments that are undeniable. They're just undeniable.
Yeah,
This
universal approval.
Yeah. Well, the question is, what is that? Where's the umami of that?
Well, when you got nature, wood, and metal, and you have a human on it, there's so many things that can go right or wrong.
Right.
So it's just like, that's how it is.
I'm
some
afraid
get bolted together and you go, wow.
Yeah. So maybe at some point in the future, we'll find some material that doesn't have, for the bodies and necks, that won't that you can dial it in to the point where you can identify what that is, but we ain't there yet.
Yeah.
We ain't there yet.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And anybody listening to this, if you got an old San Dimas, I'm looking for a real one, original finish, email me, deandelray@yahoo.com, because I'd like to have just one that I know is real and that there it is, one of those ones that were at Guitar Center.
I mean, they're around.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Hundreds of them went to New York City to Sam Ash.
How many were made, you think?
4,000 or 5,000, probably.
That's it, huh? That's it. And who was painting those? You guys? You?
In the early days, Ernie Pedregon painted early, and then I took over and painted for a few years. Then there was a guy named Bruce Ogburn, and it was a series of people. There was about a 2.5 year period where I painted every guitar.
All nitrocellulose?
No.
Oh.
We were early polyester guys.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. Never knew that.
Well, that's an interesting little side note, and I can ramble on forever, but, the red Charvel that Alan Holdsworth played.
Yeah.
I made 3 guitars for him when that started. I made one. He wanted one out of solid spruce. It cost me a fortune to get a piece of Sitka spruce that big. I made one out of gelatong, and I made one out of basswood. And as far as I know, nobody was doing basswood guitars before that, okay? Basswood was a shit wood used as furniture framing, okay? The spruce one, which is what Alan asked for, was terrible. He hated it, okay? The gelatong one, you see some pictures of him playing a white guitar with a black pickguard. That's the gelatong one. And that one was okay. The red one, which was the basswood one, was the one that he ended up playing the most. But once he decided on the basswood, we put that guitar together. And let me back up. There's 2 guys in my life that I've met that I would never argue with. Alan was one, and David Lindley is the other. Lindley is a guy who can pick up a piece of wood and tell you what it's going to sound like. He's like a fucking magician, a savant or something. We put what became the red guitar, we put that together as raw wood, and he played it. Then we finished it in a nitro finish, and he played it. And then ultimately, the red guitar was a polyester base with nitro color and a polyurethane top coat. He couldn't tell the difference. Okay?
Yeah.
And he's one of the most... I got in an argument with Alan one time, had an ebony neck on it, ebony fingerboard, and he was living down here in Tustin, which is sort of beachy, and we were up deserty. And ebony is very prone to moving around in temperature and humidity changes, so that neck would move. I bought him a 12-inch Phillips screwdriver so that he would come to rehearsal at the shop and he would adjust the neck, and then he would come home to Tustin and adjust the neck. And it was just like a clock. It was just every time it moved, that guitar moved, right? He couldn't tell the difference between finishes.
Wow.
So very sensitive guy. The argument I got in was, he said, there's underbow in the neck. And I looked at it. The thing we all have done forever is looking down the finger. I said, no, it's at the neck straight. And he goes, no, there's underbow. And I said, well, wait a minute. I'm going to be Mr. Smarty Ass here. I'll go get a Starrett straight edge, a really, high-end straight edge, and a set of feeler gauges. And I said, so, look, 4 thousandths of an inch under. There's no 4 thousandths, 3 thousandths, no, 2 thousandths, no. This is straight neck. I took the 1 thousandths, it slid under there. 1/1000th of an inch, and he could feel that.
Wow.
That was when I decided there's people in the universe I don't want to argue with.
Yeah. You're like, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
Cloth wiring on the pickups and the controls?
No.
So it's all kind of
We do cloth wiring on some things now, but that's more to make people feel good.
but that's all kind of like mid-70s Fender then. Poly paints with the all right.
We bought polyester, and in that era of time, we started off buying from Dunn Edwards, which at the time is where Fender was buying it from. We ended up, a lot of the guitars from that era, if they have a chip or something, you'll see something white underneath there. That came from a company called Ram Chemical, and that was a filled polyester, which means that it has mica or talc in it as a filler, so you get greater build.
Wow.
But
well, good last little piece of knowledge on this episode.
Yeah, we everything we do now is I paint every guitar, Friedman guitar, and they're all nitro.
Oh, yeah, wow. Cool.
So.
Cool. Well, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, my
And
pleasure.
It was an honor to talk to you. And every day your guitars come out of the radios of America and the world, actually. So it's awesome to really talk to a man who built guitars by hand that became a complete sound of a musical era. So thank you, my man.
Thank you.
And good luck on your move. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes. See ya.